Whilst this video is about what there is to do now, if you don't already know, we cannot conceptualise useful action without understanding how we got here. Nancy Fraser's The Old is Dying and the New Cannot Be Born is short, essential reading published by Verso in 2019. She uses Gramsci's theory of hegemony and counter-hegemony to explain how figures like Trump, Farage and Maloney rose to power. The Western hegemonic ideal of progressive neoliberalism is as oxymoronic as it is contradictory, tying progressive politics surrounding recognition, e.g. gay marriage, feminist rhetoric, social inclusivity, etc., with the cutthroat politics of capitalist distribution, e.g. austerity for the poor, bailouts for the rich, and both settler and neo-colonialism. It was a system that wasn't working, and counter-hegemonies coalesced to upend it. Progressive social democracy, or proto-socialism, seen in Sanders, Corbyn and Mélenchon, and reactionary neoliberalism, seen in Le Pen, Schapiller and Lien. Both took aim at either the distribution or recognition element of the system and rallied support to replace it. The former all, in one way or another, were attacked, sabotaged or collapsed, whilst the latter soared in national polling and either won power or became such a threat that the ostensible centre-left governments of the West lurched rightward so as to not lose votes to them. There are many reasons why the right wins power whilst the left seems forever shut out, and it cannot be overstated how impactful the whims of the wealthy are on this result. Right-wing politics, even outright fascism, represents no systemic threat to the pockets or reach of the rich. Inversely, the left's desire for social programs and reconstruction for the wretched of the earth does, both in that such policies are usually funded by high taxes on the top 1% or the expropriation or nationalisation of their private property, but also because uplifting the poor, addressing their material conditions and increasing access to education runs counter to the needs of capital. The owning class need people desperate for money so that wages can be depressed, thus increasing profits, whilst also lacking the information to either assess what the root cause of their struggles are or to effectively organise against them. There's a reason why the first things communists do upon successful revolutions is fight to improve literacy, and the first things fascists do is to ban and burn books. Both contribute to the longevity of their systems. Whilst reactionary radicalism is fostered, liberatory radicalism is crushed at every opportunity. Cops fire tear gas at students protesting genocide and watch from the sidelines as white supremacists invade those same encampments, allowing them to assault the protesters for hours, attacks which are then spun as clashes by a complicit media. Progressives are dissuaded from organising in smaller political parties, either with propaganda campaigns against them or through undemocratic measures which ensure that without mass adoption, the centre-to-left vote will be split, allowing the worst humans alive to run the government. Those same large parties, however, routinely fail to solidify the necessary progressive victories that their electoral successes supposedly heralded, leading both to auto-disenfranchisement from their base and for those aforementioned worst people to reclaim power and roll those victories back. Thus, the perpetual carrot is reset for another decade term. Much of organised labour is still radical, but much of it too is entangled with political parties who have betrayed the most marginalised of societies again and again. Blair's Labour refused to roll back many of Thatcher's anti-union laws. Brown's Labour continued to privatise the NHS. Starmer's Labour is virulently racist, transphobic and despises disabled people, playing the greatest hits from George Osborne and Ian Duncan Smith, blaming benefit frauds, the traveller community and greedy pensioners for the country's woes far more often than the finance capital appeasing austerity measures which deprived an untold number of communities, all whilst being funded in majority by union dues. Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palme Dutt elucidates many of these contradictions. It was written in 1934, and much of it is horrifyingly relevant 90 years later. Progressive neoliberalism is unable to square the circle that preaching the importance of social equality whilst tying it to an economic system that both neither allows for social equality and which retains a permanent underclass ripe for radicalism to be incubated within it was always to be its downfall. The old is dying and the new is struggling to be born. Now is the time of monsters. So what now? You may be utterly devastated, scared, resigned, or literally making plans to flee your town, state, or nation. There may be talk of a one-party dictatorship, of the end of voting, of mass deportations, and time will only tell how much of it is smoke concocted by the world's most famous conman, and how much of it is a machine already whirring due to the previous regime's inability or unwillingness to dismantle it. So again, what now? I've been guilty in the past of simply saying people need to organise, but why, and what does that even look like? Firstly, every right you hold today was won by people who fought in a world where those rights didn't exist. You can vote because, depending on who you are, any number of mass movements fought in the streets for your right to do so. You have holidays, sick days, overtime pay, workplace safety and a minimum wage because labour unions organised to demand them, often in times where doing so could be punished by death. And in many places, fascism rose and was slain by people who took a very literal meaning of the notion. All that is solid melts into air, and as Mark Fisher lays out, capitalism is both a hyper-abstract impersonal structure, and it would be nothing without our cooperation. So don't cooperate with it, but rather with the people who are also, right now, searching for some avenue of action. When Corbyn was defeated in 2019, I was completely lost, and in an alternate timeline I could well have given in to despair and become some left in aesthetics only grifter selling proxies for the people t-shirts for a tidy profit. However, I received a phone call from a now dear friend of mine inviting me to a meeting with Acorn, a local community union, and I haven't looked back. Under both the Tories and Labour government, we have campaigned successfully to keep low-income households exempt from council tax payments, occupied banks and forced them to abolish policies which let landlords discriminate against benefit claimants. We've shut down arms manufacturers supplying Israel, crashed council meetings to demand justice for vulnerable residents, and resisted dozens of evictions, and that's my local branch alone. There are branches throughout my country and indeed the world, and they're also far from the only organisation doing amazing work. Palestine Action, Youth Demand, the Independent Workers' Union of Great Britain, to name a few. Organising not only brings positive material change, not only builds a coalition of people ready and able to see the world through a materialist lens, but also charges your soul. The struggle carries on, but you don't have to struggle alone. I implore you to find a means to join and contribute to such an organisation, or if you're already in one, reach out to people desperate to know that there's something that they can do. It can be as easy as Googling name of your town mutual aid or activist groups, or is there a union in name of your workplace/industry. Organising around solidifying or bringing about progressive policy is not only a necessary endeavour, but a successful one too. 4 states which elected Trump as president also passed referendums either solidifying access to abortion or overturning bans. Hell, Missouri elected Trump over Harris and Republicans over Democrats in every major race for the Senate and state legislature. However, they also voted not only to enshrine abortion access in their constitution, but also to increase the minimum wage and to make employers provide sick pay. Policies which, last I checked, aren't part of the agenda for maybe the most Reddit administration in human history. Education is also vital. Not just for yourself, but there is a list of accessible books I'd recommend reading for some revolutionary optimism and guidance in the description, but also for those around you. This can be done by supporting independent media that's both willing to untangle the web of lies that the right pumps out, but who are doing so whilst also showing an alternative. It is not enough to prove Faragian falsehoods to be what they are, because by the time you've done so, he's already spread 2 more with the aid of his millionaire friends in the corporate media. You also have to show people a road beyond them. If you're looking for a first step, Some More News, available in both video and podcast form, Lenin would be proud, is a pretty great source for deep dives on reactionary news stories, policies, and personalities, whilst also showing and advocating for the alternatives in an accessible and engaging way. Any news programme is going to be coloured by biases, overlooked perspectives, and not for everyone, but if someone you know is being seduced by the easy answers of the online right, getting them to see what reality and research actually looks like, even if you have to trick them into engaging with it, may well steer them into more humane waters. It should not be our job to educate people on basic questions of justice, but we don't have Fox News or Elon Musk on our side, so unfortunately it is. Education is also vital because while some red states passed abortion access, some blue states voted in favour of deeply reactionary policy. California, for example, failed to abolish slavery when it voted to retain involuntary labour as a legal punishment for crime, an abhorrent system that both disproportionately impacts black people, but also which incentivises increased incarceration as a for-profit industry. It is not enough to organise people in a bloc or union or party and assume that everyone's on board with liberation as a result. Class consciousness is vital, but as anyone organising spaces in pursuit of social justice can attest to, bigotries and cruelties opposed upon us by our cultural hegemony can be carried through and must be challenged in order to dissipate. Seeing untold liberals gleeful that some of Trump's Latino voter base may well get caught up in his mass deportation plans is sickening and demonstrative. There is no daylight between a Trump voter complaining that his policies are hurting the wrong people and a resistance Democrat gloating about the exact same thing. The trade union movement has had to learn this too, and is a perfect example about how class politics alone cannot pull us through this. At their inception, many labour unions in the US actively championed genocidal policies against indigenous people, and then held discriminatory policies around black workers, or even fought peace protesters, and more recently, partially broke their own strikes in order to ship weapons fueling a genocide. Not every union is like this, and many of the unions which did hold these reactionary perspectives have turned a corner, but only as a result of dedicated people within their structures fighting for change. James Baldwin's quote, "If I am starving, you are in danger," is endlessly correct. No one is free until we all are, and you cannot fight for liberation for some people whilst ensuring that others are kept in chains. All you're doing there is expanding privileges. Education is vital to ensuring that people understand that this whole "fuck you, got mine" thing is gonna get us all killed one day. Right now, the right of the Democratic Party is blaming Trump's electoral victory on Kamala's campaign for being too woke, a laughable falsehood considering the party's embracement of tough borders, the military-industrial complex, trans-panic rhetoric, and GOP ghouls like the Cheneys. But the lie that woke won't win will spread beyond registered Democrats and into your neighbourhoods when you try and convince them to pressure your city council to keep a library open or to increase funding for homeless infrastructure. You have to prepare evidence arguments to undercut these falsehoods as you organise, doing so whilst assessing who has been hoodwinked and who holds onto this propaganda because it matches an unwavering worldview. To end, I want to read from Hewey Newton's Revolutionary Suicide. He recounts a memorable case from the early days of the Black Panther Party, where a young boy ran into their office shouting that the police had entered his family home without a warrant and his parents hadn't been in to stop them. So Newton, Warren Tucker, and another member rushed to defend the house. Upon arriving, "The cop told me to leave the house. The little boy asked me to stay, so I continued to question the police, telling them that they had no right to be there. The policeman finally turned on me. 'You're gonna get out of here,' he said. 'No,' I said. 'You leave if you don't have a search warrant.' In the middle of this argument, the boy's father arrived and also asked the police for a search warrant. When the police admitted that they did not have one, he ordered them out. As they started to leave, one of the policemen stopped in the doorway and said to the father, 'Why are you telling us to get out? Why don't you get rid of these Panthers? They're the troublemakers.' The father replied, 'Before this, I didn't like the Panthers. I had heard bad things about them. But in the last few minutes, I've changed my mind because they helped my son when you pushed him around.'" I think about this quote all of the time, and I understand that this is where our power lies. It's something that the right simply doesn't have. Whilst they can promise to harm the right kind of people, they cannot actually help those who they rely on for political support. Anti-communism is rife in the West, and the right presents the liquidation of everything which seeks to alleviate suffering as a fight against socialism. But sometimes it only takes one moment of action to blast through billions of dollars of programming to show someone that in reality it is their neighbor, not their boss, who has their best interests at heart. Our results will not be immediate. What we build will take time and effort and struggle, but any victory worth celebrating can only come through education and power from the grassroots up. And if there is to be no victory, then I will fight forever. Organize, educate, liberate. We have a world to win. So let's do it together.